Morning, everyone, and welcome. We are very pleased to kick off today's programming with a great group. I am with the ABA Early Career Strategy Group. My name is Stephen, but I'm not the star of the show. I'm going to go ahead and hand it off to the folks who will be speaking with you today. The one thing that I will ask as we get into the program, if you do have questions, please do feel free to use the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen. We will be tracking those throughout, and some of them we may wind up answering in real time. Others we may wait till the end in a Q&A session. But if you leave your comment in the Q&A, that'll get us what we need to know that you have the question. If it goes in the chat, we may or may not see it immediately, which is why I ask you to use the Q&A. But without any further ado, thanks for being with us, and let's get started.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jennifer Robinson, and I'm your moderator for this amazing webinar that we have for you here today. I hope you all are ready for a riveting and inspiring presentation. This program aims to encourage young attorneys to run for office, serve on boards and commissions, and hopefully help them to become better advocates in their communities. Today, we will explore ways to empower young attorneys to best utilize their legal education and skills to become more involved in public service and incite meaningful change in their communities. So before we get into the discussion, let's take a moment to meet our panel. Representative Sharice Davis serves Kansas' 3rd Congressional District in the United States House of Representatives. When she was elected into her first term in the 116th Congress, she became one of the first 2 Native American women to serve in Congress. Representative Davis centers her work on putting Kansans first, and she also holds leadership positions such as Vice Chair of the Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure, and as a member on the Committee on Small Business. Welcome, Ms. Davis. Senator Danny Burgess currently serves as a senator in the state of Florida since November of 2020. Senator Burgess previously served as both the city councilman from 2005 to 2008 and as mayor of Zephyr Hills, Florida in 2013 and 2014. This was before he was elected to the Florida House of Representatives in 2014. During his time as a House of Representatives, Senator Burgess also served as executive director of the Florida Department of Veterans Affairs before being elected to the Florida Senate. Welcome, Senator Burgess. Mr. Wesley Bugg has focused his career on legal compliance and business development, particularly for startups and small nonprofits. He serves as Deputy Director of Court Vision International, Inc., a nonprofit which promotes youth advocacy and conflict resolution. He also serves as a Chief Operating Officer, Legal Compliance Officer, and Financial Assistant for 2 nonprofit organizations whose missions are to empower men, increase breastfeeding rates, and decrease infant mortality rates. Those 2 organizations are Reaching Our Sisters Everywhere and Reaching Our Brothers Everywhere. Welcome, Mr. Bugg. Mr. Spencer Hastings, who was appointed by the governor as the state of Florida's Condominium Ombudsman in July of 2020. His office works to resolve issues in condominium associations, to provide educational services and election oversight, and to recommend new legislation to the legislature and the governor's office. Now, of course, this was a highlight reel of our accomplished panel. I welcome you all to read their extensive bios available online. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to stop sharing now. And just a quick reminder, this is a live program and we will have the question and answer session at the end. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in that Q&A component on the webinar here. So again, thank you to all of our panel for helping us here today. Welcome, everyone. So before we begin, can each of you take a moment to share a bit on your backgrounds and perspectives and what you will bring into the panel today? Representative Davis, let's start with you.
Well, good afternoon, morning. It's still morning. Okay. Good morning, everybody. I'm Sharice Davids. I represent the 3rd District in Kansas. And I'm in DC right now. There's a lot of sirens going on. I think there's a couple of things that I want to share about my background, but I don't want to take a ton of time here. A couple of pieces that I think are really important about like kind of the time that we're in is that we're seeing this kind of resetting of expectations about who runs for office, about who we elect, about the ways that we support those folks. And I think what we've seen more recently is a lot of folks who have more experiences that are actually not that uncommon. And that's certainly what I feel like my experience has been like. You know, I was raised by a single mom. She served in the Army for 20 years. And it's not uncommon to be raised by a single parent. I went to public schools the whole time I was growing up, and then started off at community college. Actually got my associates at Johnson County Community College, which is in the district that I get to represent now. It took me 4 years to get my associate's degree. It took me 4 more years to get my bachelor's degree. And I worked the whole time I was in school. So all of those things I feel like are actually not that uncommon. It's not uncommon to be a first generation college student. It's not uncommon to have to work while you're in school. It's not uncommon to take a little longer than 2 years or 4 years to get degrees. And I think that those kinds of things are really, really important for us to be seeing in our state legislatures, in Congress, in the Senate, in the federal government across the board. And I think I'll stop there because I feel like I'll get to some other of the things when we get more into the conversation part of it.
Absolutely. Thank you. How about you, Senator Burgess? Burgess? Oh.
Perfect. Go ahead. And actually, do you mind repeating the question, because I had a little technical glitch right when the Congresswoman started talking, so I want to make sure I fully heard the whole thing.
Absolutely. Just can you take a moment to share a bit about your backgrounds and perspectives, what you bring to the panel today?
That's what I thought. So I think like Rep. David said, and it's so nice to meet you virtually, Rep. Davids. We're shaped by our experiences. I grew up in a small town in Zephyr Hills, Florida. If anybody's ever had a Zephyr Hills bottled water, that's where I come from, and very proud of it. And you know, growing up in a small community, being involved in that community, that I believe your community helps shape you. And I was the first to go to college in my family as well, and you know, I really just felt like I wanted to be engaged, wanted to know more, wanted to learn more, and I didn't quite know what that looked like or felt like. But you know, I think life has a way of pointing you in directions, and it's up to us as to whether or not we walk through that door that might be opening. And so I've tried to take chances when I can, and you know, try to, you know, sometimes it's a leap of faith, sometimes it's scary. But you know, I was a political science major at USF, go Bulls. I went to law school at Berry Law School in Orlando, and I'm in the Army. And you know, just growing up in a small community, I really just wanted to serve. And so all of those things combined just you know, led me to want to get into some form of public service. Didn't really know what it would look like, and here I am now getting the chance to serve my community as a state senator. It's pretty amazing. So I think we're shaped by our surroundings and obviously our families and upbringings, and that all sort of helps point us in that particular direction. But yeah, I think the rest of the conversation will flesh a lot of that out.
Yeah, thank you. What about you, Mr. Bugg?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me, and echo the remarks earlier. So African-American, of course, that has shaped my life, you know, in a big way, and especially with all of what's going on in this country. But an attorney my family's in the medical field, so I've always seen them helping people, and in our church, volunteering, things like that. I've always just felt a sense of fulfillment by helping other people, especially when people come with needs. There's already something that, you know, you can assist them with. So didn't want to go into medicine, so saw that law would be another good career opportunity, with more flexibility, in my opinion. But in the work that I do with promoting breastfeeding and promoting men and maternal health and promoting other people starting their own businesses, this really is advocacy. So me just wanting to help communicate the needs and desires of some people to another group of people. And raised in Atlanta, Georgia, or Decatur, Georgia, went to University of Miami for law school. So all of those kind of shape me knowing other people want to move around also. So what is the culture and life in different communities is something that I've also wanted to share with people. And we'll talk about other things during the panel. I also love sports. So sports has always been a fun thing. I want to start that off early.
Thank you. And what about you, Mr. Hennings?
Good morning. And first off, thanks for inviting me on. Before my appointment to Condominium Ombudsman for the state of Florida, I was in private practice as an attorney. I'm a real estate attorney by trade. I have been working in real estate law my entire life. My grandfather was a real estate attorney, and he was my inspiration to go to law school. I used to work for his law firm every summer since like middle school. I went to Florida State for undergrad and then the University of Miami for law school, just like Wesley. And I think going from the private sector to the public sector has allowed me to bring in some unique experience and perspectives. I know the question was about perspectives, some interesting perspectives coming to the public sector from the private sector. So if anyone's listening that wants to go to the transition to the public sector and you're working for a law firm right now in the private sector, I think that could be a huge advantage, and I'm happy to get more into that throughout the panel.
Thank you. So each of you has spent years in public service. Why would you say public service is important to each of you, or even important to democracy as a whole? We want to start with Senator Burgess.
Thank you. And that's a really, really good question. Public service is important to me. And again, I think, you're shaped by your experiences. And I've grown up in a community that really is more engaged in everything around us than maybe other places. And that's a very special thing to be a part of. And so at a very early age, I just can recall, that civic engagement and that sense of civic duty. And I think also being in the military, you really get a sense for service. And so that really sparked my interest in wanting to serve, not just in uniform, but out. And, you have an opportunity to help people. You have an opportunity to change lives. The most important thing we do, in my opinion, is not necessarily just legislation or anything related to our budget. Those are critical roles that are unique to a legislative body. But the most important thing that I think we can do is constituent service work. And through constituent service work, we are able to truly change an individual's life, help them navigate massive layers of bureaucracy that without our assistance, they wouldn't be able to probably navigate, because it's so cumbersome, it's so difficult, and it's honestly not made to be easy, if I'm being frank. I mean, that's unfortunate. And so we're able to do that for them. And so, growing up, I never really thought like, oh, we have an issue, we should call our congresswoman or man or senator or rep. And, you should. And we're a service that is there, that is free, and we can help you. Anything ranging from veterans issues to immigration. I mean, we can help you.
Thank you. Mr. Bugg, why is public service important to you?
I think voices need to be heard. And the second part of the question about why is it important to the democracy, because I think that different opinions can be right. So, one group, people who want certain things may feel like they're right, and someone else who either doesn't want them to have that or wants something else may also be right for different reasons. So I think public service is important and being an attorney is important because you can hopefully communicate both sides of that. So both sides can become aware of something they may have previously been unaware of. So for me, that's been the good part of what I'm doing, just working with organizations or working with groups who have an interest in trying to learn more about it instead of just taking one side.
What about you, Mr. Hennings?
You know, I think in general, we all have a sense to leave things better than we found them. And I think, you know, in the spirit of this program being for young lawyers, I think the younger generation can look at issues that have been around in society for generations or just decades with a new young perspective. And I think it's so important to bring that perspective into the government, into, you know, elected positions in the private sector as well. And I think that, you know, in doing that, the ability to help people is some of the most rewarding work that you can do.
Representative Davids?
I think it's a really good question about what why public service is important, and then why it's important for our democracy. Because I don't know that we spend enough time thinking about that and talking about that growing up, and kind of mainstream societal conversations that we have. And you know, I mentioned earlier, my mom was in the Army when I was growing up, from before I was born until after I got out of high school. And then she just retired after 20 years at the post office, like 3 weeks ago. So I'm very excited for her. And I think getting the chance to see my mom like spend her whole career in public service has shaped kind of my outlook and thinking on it. One, we live in a country where we have a democracy. We get to, if we want to, if we like the way something's working, or we don't like the way something's working, we can do something about it. And in a way that is not available to people in other parts of the world. And that's a great privilege, and it's also a great responsibility. You know, I mean, it can be sometimes overwhelming to think about the systemic issues that face us. And everybody went to law. I mean, I don't know how many people went to law school thinking like, oh, I want to go to law school because I want to change the world. And then you get there and then you're like, man, law school really beats you down. But the thing that you realize is that like each of us has something we can do in this like much larger system. And in this case, it's like, how does public service help the democracy as a whole? And I feel like the skill sets that we can bring to the table, and sometimes that's because we're lawyers. Sometimes it's because of the lived experiences that we have, whether it's spending a lot of time as the only person like you in a room, and seeing how often one question can change the course of an entire conversation or policy or something like that. You know, I think that's the kind of stuff that's really important when you decide to go down a path of public service, that you get the chance to bring all of that skill sets, personal experiences, lived experiences, the stories that folks have shared with you. You get to bring all of that to the table, and you get to be the person who says, now, who else do we need to talk to? Who hasn't been at the table before? Who do we need to hear from so that we can be of service to as many people as possible? And I think that part is really important. We don't get to hear about that as much. But I do want to, like, Senator Burgess, I appreciated your comments about the constituent services, because I think that is one of the most important and very specific things that folks, you know, at the federal level, folks sometimes don't really know what it is. Like, well, what are you doing out there? But if they come into the office and they need help with the IRS, I mean, we can't pay people's taxes, but if someone's having an issue with the IRS, we can help them navigate that, you know? And so I think that is also, it's super important. So I'm really glad you brought it up.
Thank you. So I want to talk about how specifically to get involved. What would you say are the best avenues to get involved in public service, or like what pointers would you have on taking the first step to get involved? Mr. Bugg, do you want to start us out?
Sure. Usually just showing up. So showing up and volunteering. So usually in most spaces, they're looking for additional assistance. So being an attorney or just being someone with time to donate is something that a lot of boards and organizations are looking for. You go to one meeting and you become the chairman of a committee or something like that. So being honest, having a good reputation, of course, is very important. But to get started, I would just say find something you're passionate about, search when or where they meet, who to talk to, and then, call that person. A lot of people are very approachable, especially when you're offering your assistance to them. So managing your time, I'll say, would be important too. You don't want to go too far out telling them you're their savior, and then you have other obligations that you need to fulfill. But they're out there, and I definitely encourage everyone to be a part of boards and offices that they're interested in.
Thank you. Representative Davis, do you have any other pointers? Any other pointers?
I mean, I completely agree showing up. I think you'd be surprised at just how much assistance you can be of, but also how much you learn when you show up and listen to people and what the concerns and issues are. In the role that I have right now, I often say and think, like, members of Congress don't have all the answers, and it's really, really important to learn how to listen to folks and get to I actually think this is one of the things that lawyers, when you go to law school and they say, like, well, we're not going to teach you how to be a lawyer. We're going to teach you how to think like a lawyer. That one of the skills that you pick up that I didn't show up to law school with, I think some people do show up with the skill, is really getting to the heart of what the issue is. Like, well, what is the crux of the issue here? And I think the more you listen, the more people are actually they can share with you what the crux of the issue is and what they think is going to be the most helpful. And I say that because a lot of times some of the most innovative stuff comes from community work that's already happening. I'm not going to show up somewhere and probably I'm also not the ideas person. I'm not an ideas person. I've already had my 4 good ideas for my lifetime. They're over and done with now. But if I can listen to folks and take in what they're saying, I think that can be super impactful. So that's one piece when it comes to a skill set. And then the other thing that I think is really necessary is to really take care of yourself, because it's exhausting to be, and I mean, it's exhausting to be a lawyer. I feel like most of us, I mean, maybe not everybody agrees with me, but I found it to be a very your brain is taxed in ways that, are really, and it's good, but it also you got to give yourself time for your brain to recover, for your body to recover, drinking lots of water, taking naps, getting enough sleep or whatever. And obviously that's not always possible. It's not like I'm getting, 9 hours of sleep every night or something, but when you can, just being cognizant of that, I think that can go a long way to being able to help incite or ignite some of the change that you're hoping to be part of.
Awesome, thank you. Mr. Hennings, do you have anything to add to that?
Not too much. I would echo what the co-panelists have said about showing up. I think the networking aspect and just showing up, volunteering for causes that you think are important and that you're passionate about, that's really the way to get started, I would say. And when you're in that scene and you're volunteering and you're helping other people, you never know what opportunity is going to come to you. It could lead to a job, it could lead to certain connections, but I would say just taking that initial step to involve yourself is really where you want to start.
Senator Burgess, anything? Any pointers you have?
That's how I got my start, and I think that's how we all did. Is just being involved, both on a community level and also, in a government level. There's committees, there's boards, there's, there's when I was in high school, there was a youth city council. That's honestly how I had my exposure to local government. As attorneys, I think that we offer value in thought. And, we all get made fun of, right? Like, oh, there's too many lawyers in politics. How many times have we heard that joke? And okay, that's true. Like in the state legislature, it's cool because we're citizen legislators. So we our value is what we bring to the table. And you have farmers, you have doctors, you have everything in between, insurance, obviously attorneys. But I've seen the value of attorneys. We really understand not just the law, but through the lens that we've been taught to think through. The best thing I think that our law degrees have given us is our ability to critically think. For me, it didn't change my belief system, but it taught me that instead of being, the young 18-year-old guy that, my political affiliation or else, right? Like, like that mindset, that mantra, law school really helped me to understand there could be multiple ways to view an issue, to understand differences of opinion and build bridges across those divides. So I think as lawyers, honestly, we have a very unique perspective and skill set that can help us not just accomplish the mission, but to also, help bridge some divides in the world, in our country. So, I think we have a very unique opportunity to do just that if we harness our powers for the good.
Thanks. And kind of piggybacking off that a little bit, I think you and Representative Davids talked a little bit about the skills and that you can utilize and strengthen to incite change in communities. Any other, like you talked about the critical thinking skills, any other skills that young lawyers could strengthen or utilize when inciting change, when trying to incite meaningful change?
We have great communication skills, right? Like we have been taught to both advocate zealously and also be able to analyze everything, context, history, all the it really, that whole package is an asset. And so I think our investment in our education, and some of us like myself will be paying for that and probably until the day we die, is something that we can, that maximum value for what we put into it, right, we'll get out. And I think that's how we can do it. And that's why I think you see, again, we're the front end of the joke, but I think you see a lot of lawyers going into politics because there's that natural integration, natural nexus from the two.
Can I add something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, first of all, I completely agree. My student loans will die with me. But I think that one of the really cool things about what you learn how to do in law school is it's almost like it's problem solving, but in a different way than what most people are used to, because we get a full view of how the system works. And I think there are a lot of places where people don't think in terms of like what is your role in the system. And because we learn those like kind of core Civ Pro, con law, like all of whatever the like core things are. What is a contract? Like, I think there's something about that system and learning how the system works that can really help us evaluate and see like where are the levers? What are the levers that we can pull to make a difference? And I think, and I've really noticed that in my time here is being able to recognize like, oh, actually, this is not a legislative issue. This is a regulatory issue. And here's the most appropriate way to address that. And then, so even if you're looking at like, not even like running for office, but helping an advocate, a nonprofit that's trying to get housing dollars or something, like lawyers are able to like kind of do that research, get to the bottom of where in the system to even look. Because I think that's one of the hardest parts is, you know, folks don't know where to look. And I think that's something that you pick up along the way as a lawyer that is just super helpful.
Jennifer, I'd like to add something really quickly also.
Absolutely.
About the necessary skills that young lawyers should start to hone. And I wanted to reiterate something that Representative David said, which is listening. Obviously, communication is everything, but listening is such an underrated skill. And, you know, part of my job is resolving disputes for people, acting as a neutral third party representing the state, trying to get things resolved and sort of mediate disputes so that people don't have to go through official complaint processes and they don't have to litigate them. They don't have the money to litigate them or the energy or time. And a lot of what I do is listening. Just showing someone that you understand where they're coming from, you understand what the issue is, and showing that empathy to both sides is, I think, such an initial step in getting issues resolved. And then lastly, I'll just add persistence. I feel like this isn't really something that they talk about in law school, but a lot of the issues we're talking about require a lot of persistence to accomplish the goals, rather. You know, these are a lot of times systems that have been in place for years, decades, generations, and it's not going to be an overnight fix. You know, it takes a lot of work and a lot of persistence and a lot of annoying people to get where you want to go.
Thank you. Mr. Bugg, do you have anything to add to those skills?
I do. I'd mention, especially again for young lawyers, that we feel that the answer is out there. So being able to investigate, which has been mentioned before, but being open-minded in the sense that if the system worked one way before, we can change it to work a different way. And there might be a cost-efficient way or in a way that's not too cumbersome. So just kind of being open to, you know, finding new ways of doing something and fixing an old problem a new way is one thing that I would say young lawyers are in a good position to help. I had something else, but I forgot. I might come back to it.
It's all right. Thank you. So when talking about public service and inciting change, a lot of people think that always means running for office. We do have two panelists who haven't ran or not elected officials who haven't ran for office. What are ways you can incite change without running for office? You want to go and start us off, Mr. Bugg?
Yeah. So just being helpful, showing some best practices is what they use in the medical field sometimes. So just kind of showing people what works. So we know marketing is important. We know rent is expensive. So just kind of sharing those tricks of the trade to those who are unaware, I think is a way to help in the private sector. Also understanding how the government and budgets and public officers are elected or function is also helpful. So letting someone know you might have an 8-year plan and your senator or your representative will only be there for 2 more years. So instead of spending so much time advocating for that one person, you might want to look at the next person or the office in general. So kind of letting them know, I think it was mentioned before, how to manage that time, how to look long-term is helpful. And then just your reputation again comes up. Being an attorney, although it's sometimes seen as a bad thing, people love if you're their attorney. So, you know, kind of being that figure in the room that lets everyone know that your client is taking it seriously, even if you're your own client.
Thank you. Mr. Hennings?
Yeah, you know, I think running for office is probably the best way to do it. I think it's the most direct way to do it. But I think there's tons of other ways that you can be bringing about change in your community, you know, local level, state level, the national level. So, you know, it's not just running for office. It can be getting on boards, being involved in communities, volunteering, any way which you're working to shape public policy. And this is possible tons of different capacities within the government. I would even say, you know, working as a public defender, such as yourself, at some level, you're doing that as well. Teaching is a great way, you know, participating in events like this. Thank you again for inviting me on. I think, you know, events like this even are a great way to do that. So I think, even in the private sector as well. But I would say my personal belief is running for office is probably the best way to bring about new changes.
Thank you for that. Talking about running for office in hopes, so people run for office in hopes of making change in their communities. What would be the recommendation for the best ways to start that out? Senator Burgess?
So the best advice I ever received, and sort of the way I analyze what I'm going to do is somebody asked me once, is the door open? And the question I had was, what do you think? Like, what should I do this? And they said, is the door opening for you, or are you having to pry it open? And at the time I had just come off of active duty training in the Army. My wife and I had really just gotten married. We were getting ready for our first child, and I was mayor of my hometown in Zephyr Hills, actually. So which is like a dream come true. I loved it. It was amazing. Still probably be my favorite thing I've ever done professionally. But I didn't know that I really wanted to do it. I actually kind of turned down the opportunity several times, and I couldn't answer every question I needed, right? Like to have an answer to for my family's sake as a young lawyer. And somebody that had a lot of student loan debt, as we talked about earlier, and really just starting off their career, just timing. And if anybody knows anything about the state legislature, it's considered a part-time job, both on paper and in pay, when in reality it's anything but in the nation's, the third largest state in the nation. So it was a daunting decision, but really what put me over the edge was that question and that answer. And so I used that exact mantra when it came to whether or not I should resign from the Florida House and accept the governor's appointment to lead the Department of Veterans Affairs, which I realized that in that moment that you don't just have to be elected to serve, in a government capacity, and that honestly, where you implement policy is really just as important in a different way. So I was able to serve the state's 1.5 million veterans, and that was amazing. That's a huge constituency. Talk about serving those who served us. And then, so then, to come full circle, I was asked if I'd consider running for the state Senate. And so I had to resign as the executive director and run for this, and same analysis. And so, lawyers are very analytical, right? So that's honestly, every bit of the way is a leap of faith and a chance and a risk. And that's scary. But I think people in our profession are not risk averse. We're willing to take chances when they make sense, when there's, a logical nexus between the chance and the, the risk and the reward, I guess, if you will. And the reward being the chance to serve. And believe me, it's worth it. So if you do have the desire to serve, there's nothing more gratifying than knowing that you're changing somebody's life for the better. And it doesn't matter if you're Democrat, Republican, or anything in between. I think we all approach this with the same goal. We just may have different ways of getting there, and that's okay. That's America. And that's what makes us great.
Thank you. What about you, Representative Davids? Any thoughts on getting started in running for office?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the things that's from this conversation today, and then also from just kind of like watching how the political landscape shifts and changes and grows in a lot of ways, there's not really a set path to get to elected office. I think so much of it is there's a huge piece of it that's introspective, like for what purpose am I doing this? Because people can tell if you're showing up to like really do public service, or if you're showing up to like serve yourself, and so there's that piece. There's like the introspective piece of like evaluating like what do you want to do and what do you think like success in public service means. For some people, it will mean running for office, even if they're scared, even if they're like worried about the risk, because it's worth it and it's important. So I think there's that piece is like getting like really like spending some time evaluating like, for what purpose do you want to do? And it can be this, or it can be anything really. And then the second piece is, spending a lot of time talking to folks about what they care about getting to know whatever the constituency is of the area. And then there's also the decision point of, like, even when it's a part-time legislature, if you're going to run for a state office, if you're going to run for federal office, if you're going to run for county commission or a city council seat, school board, like, these things take up a lot of time. And some of them are full-time jobs in pay and commitment, and some of them are full-time jobs just in commitment. So I think there's that piece of it, like seeing, like deciding for yourself if it feels like the right thing to do, and then also figuring out if it's the right time for you and that sort of thing. But absolutely, if you're thinking about running for office, like, that in and of itself is already a sign that you should probably, like, do that deep dive and figure out if you want to do it, because it takes a special kind of someone to think, you know what, I should run for Congress. And if you're the type of person that's willing to even have that thought, then you should explore it. Because it's a really important thing to step up. I think, Spencer mentioned that earlier, like, it's important, and it is a really good way to make a difference. It's not the only way, but it is a good way to do it.
Thank you for that. I want to take a moment to talk about boards and commissions. We've mentioned them a little bit earlier in the webinar. I guess I want to focus on how one goes about finding a board or a commission to serve on in their community. Where would be, like, a good place to start looking for, like, one of those positions? Mr. Bugg, you want to start us out?
Sure. So the way I do it is try to find boards or commissions that have successes. So find the ones that are winning. And the reason I say that is because I want to impact change in a positive way, or continue the positive work that a group is doing. So usually with boards, they'll meet monthly or however so often, and that's your time to have your voice heard. And if you speak for either your constituents or your communities or whatever goals and objectives you're speaking for, you want to be a part of those groups, because they likely have the apparatus around them to get things done. So they have someone drafting, they have someone taking minutes at the meetings, they have the right people at the table, or have the influence they need to get the job done. But then also I would invite people to invite others into that group as well. So again, is the door open for you? Are you prying it, which was mentioned, trying to open that door for other people so then you can transition to other boards. So that's one way of doing it. That's something that I've used.
Thanks. Mr. Hennings, do you have any ideas for us?
I'm actually going to pass on this question. Statutorily, I'm not allowed to become a political candidate, so I kind of stay away from all of that. But I think the rest of the panelists will have great answers.
Thanks. Representative Davids?
Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about is it depends on what you're, like, what you care about the most. But almost always you can find other people who care about it too. And I say that because sometimes it's something where there's already an organized group, and sometimes it's more like, if you care about environmental issues or something, or voting, or like entrepreneurship, you can find all kinds of groups that might be working in that space, and maybe it's not necessarily policy, but I think you can, if that's what you want to do, just building a community of people around some of the stuff you care the most about, that can lead to all kinds of change. And I think that, so I think just finding people who care about the same kind of stuff as you. And sometimes that means like taking something that's loose, a more loose concept, and like starting your own thing, or building a coalition with other groups or something like that. Like there's all kinds of ways that you can jump in, and sometimes it'll be there's already an existing system, and sometimes it'll be that the framework for it is there, but it's not quite formed yet.
Thank you. Senator Burgess, anything to add to that?
I think everybody nailed it, and I think you got a great ombudsman there. The governor made a good choice. We must be a bunch of lawyers here if we're able to parse that out. So no, I think that was great answer. You know, your local communities, will have a list of boards. Like here in the city of Zephyr Hills, there's, you know, everything from the Historical Preservation Society to Main Street Zephyr Hills to you know, the planning commission. So it just depends on what your skill set is and your interest, and you can go from there. Oh, there's another way that everybody can serve. This is kind of unique. You could be a magistrate for a city, or you could be a city attorney. My law partner is actually a city attorney for the city of Zephyr Hills. And so that's another unique way that lawyers can kind of be engaged in a service through their community by, you know, if there's a vacancy for those positions, I would encourage any lawyer to apply. And, you know, you'll go through that process, whatever that city, municipality, or whatever might have in place. But that's not a bad job, and it's also a really awesome way to be exposed to governance.
Thank you for that. That is something that I hadn't even thought about myself until you mentioned it. Okay, so just a few more quick questions. What would you say you think the role of attorneys is in pushing and making or inciting change in the communities? You want to start us out, Senator Burgess?
Sure. Can you repeat that question if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think that the role of attorneys is in pushing for or inciting change in our communities, specifically as attorneys?
I think I would fall back a little bit on my earlier comments and the value that attorneys can bring to the table, and not just from a legal perspective, but also from kind of an ethical perspective, you know, an ability to bridge divides, you know, and I do believe there's a lot more that unites us than divides us, far more. And so if we can harness that ability and put it to good use, you know, I think we'd all be better off. So attorneys can bring a lot of value. We get a bad rap, but, you know, if we're putting our skill set to service, to public service, I think we can do a lot of good.
Mr. Bugg, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, but, I would say being able to read the room or gauge the room. So sometimes knowing when your group or when the group, you know, both sides need a small win before the bigger win happens. So sometimes it's, instead of trying to do a 1-year deal, let's do a 6-month or 3-month deal. So that way we can get something done and then move forward. Or, you know, if you don't have all the funds now, let's ask the other group if they're okay with payment plans instead of, you know, a one-time lump sum. So those kind of skills, being able to know, you know, we might not be able to get the full thing done, but will part of it help us get that full thing done? Is something that unique that attorneys can do.
Representative Davids?
Yeah, I think that there's a couple of areas where lawyers have a kind of like I mean, we have a unique position in society already. You know, we are fiduciaries for other people. We have to be zealous advocates for people. We have, we hold ourselves to a certain set of standards when it comes to professional responsibility. So I do think that there's an element of that isn't present in some other professions even. And it's not to disparage other professions. It just means that like it gives us a lens through which we evaluate what's going on that can be really, really helpful when talking about making change, because, you know, because we have to be zealous advocates, it also means that we're likely aware of unintended consequences, you know, like spending time being able to really like thoroughly think through, like, what is the consequence of what we're doing right now? I think that's something that often lawyers show up with, and it can play a big role in that change making we're talking about. And then the second thing I would say is that when we think about how often, I want to say this in the right way. When we think about how often change needs to happen, and who are the people who have been in the room for a really long time, because we spend so much time thinking about stuff like, I mean, it's so funny. I haven't thought this much about what I learned in law school as I have, you know, in preparation for this, but even just saying like, what's a reasonable person, right? Like imagining who got to decide what reasonable person meant, you know, and how has our society changed since then? Bringing that to the table, bringing the ability that we have to even just take a step back and say, like, not just, you know, what are we trying to accomplish, but how did we decide that this was the thing we wanted to accomplish? And so I think that there's this like element of advocacy and fiduciary responsibility and all that kind of stuff. But then on the other side of that, or maybe, I don't know how they work together, but it's like, in addition to that, we're also asking this like these threshold questions of like, what is the change that we want to make, and how did we decide, and who is we? I mean, I think just like that kind of stuff, like, to me, that is a part of what we should be bringing to the table.
Thank you for that. Mr. Hennings.
Everyone has made amazing points. I completely agree with everything so far. If I had one thing to add, I would just say that in my experience, I think lawyers have a great ability to look at issues and look at problems with a neutral perspective. And I think today, emotions are flying so high when we're looking at issues, you know, politically, or in my case, issues in condominium associations. So the ability to stay composed and stay neutral is absolutely essential to finding solutions that both sides are going to be happy with. So I think the ability to have that kind of analytical, neutral perspective is something that I think lawyers have, that you do gain in law school, and that, you know, makes us really well equipped to incite change.
Thank you. Just have a couple more questions. I guess I wanted to kind of end with, like, what do you wish somebody had told you at the beginning of your career that would have helped you in inciting change that you would have known, like, back then when you started your career? Mr. Hennings, do you want to start us out?
Sure. I would say, don't be afraid to set big goals. And just know that you're going to have to work way harder than you think you will to get there. And also, on the same note, don't let anyone tell you that you can't achieve them, you know, but because you're not the right age, you didn't go to the right school, you didn't have the right GPA, etc. Set those goals. And as I said before, you have to be super persistent, never give up, never stop annoying people. And I would say, lastly, to look for the situations that are outside of your comfort zone, because that means you're growing. So now I look for situations where I feel uncomfortable, you know, because I'm always trying to grow and learn more. And I think that's a great mindset to have.
That is a great mindset. Senator Burgess?
Spencer just said everything. What I would say is a lesson that I did get very early on, and I really tried hard to implement, was don't be afraid to ask questions. Truly, like you're not expected to know everything all the time, if at all. This process deals with every issue you could imagine, and it's impossible to be an expert on everything. So truly, everybody says there's no stupid question, but like, you don't have to know the answer. It's okay to say, I'm going to have to get back to you. That is absolutely okay. It's the safe way to go. It's the smart way to go. And you have an opportunity to learn, and nobody faults you for that. The second thing that I really have learned through the years, and this year, I'd say I came into my own finally, was that inner confidence, right? Like every level of government I've had the opportunity to serve on, I guess I've had an opportunity to peel back a layer of the onion, or to kind of pull back the curtain, so to speak, and see the inner operation. And it's, in a way, it's demystified things for me, and at least has made me realize, like, I can do this. I can be here, and I can offer value here. And I'm, there isn't anything that necessarily sets somebody else that much more apart, right? Like I'm certainly not the smartest guy in the room, never will be, but I can be at the table and I can offer some value. And it's taken a long time for me to learn that and to realize that and to have that confidence in myself. So if you can have a little self-confidence and know that you didn't get here by accident, that you can offer, something, that really goes a long way.
Mr. Bugg?
So I would look for personal achievements as well as group successes, but also either be comfortable or expect, or, just don't be too anxious about a few failures in either of the categories. So as we've mentioned, as most attorneys will know, there'll be a lot of hard work that you'll have to do yourself. So that's something that you need to be expecting, to do work yourself. But then also that when you succeed, there should be other people succeeding with you. So, you should be helping more people out than just yourself when you succeed, but then also understand that sometimes you might not, and then sometimes the group or those that, were relying on you may be unhappy with the results. So somebody in every, most issues, someone's going to be unhappy. So just know that that's coming, but, have that confidence in yourself, that mental wellness, that the next day will be there, the sun will still come up in the morning, hopefully, and keep moving forward, but just keep striving yourself and keep trying to help others.
Representative Davids?
Yeah, I think that's a great, I'll piggyback on that idea of not being afraid to fail, or recognize that it's going to happen. We're all going to make mistakes. We're not going to get it right 100% of the time. Because one of the pieces of information that I do wish that I had much earlier in my life is that, like, no one knows what they're doing. Literally, no one knows what they're doing. You show up at a lot, like whatever your first job is when you start, whether it's a law firm or whatever else, and it seems like everybody knows what they're doing. And really, it's just a lot of educated guesses. Like this is something similar to what I've seen before, but like, no one knows what they want to be when they grow up. No one knows exactly, like, no one knows where they're going to be in 5 years. Like, we're all making educated guesses. We're all making it up as we go along. And I kind of wish that someone had told me that like a long time ago, because I spent too long thinking, like, at some point I'll know what I'm doing. At some point I won't feel like I'm just trying to figure it out as I go along. And then I was like, oh, the curtain got pulled back. And I was like, none of these people know what they're doing, And so I think that that's something that, like, if we can just kind of like internalize that, it's super helpful. And then as soon as possible, pay off the student loans. Because I'm still like, come on now. That's what I feel like. So I don't know. That's it. That's what I got.
I appreciate that. All right, everyone, that's about all the time we have for our program here. I would like to thank all of our attendees for tuning in and engaging with our panel. And of course, I want to thank our amazing panel, Representative Davids, Senator Burgess, Mr. Hennings, and Mr. Bugg. Thank you all so very much for coming and taking time to discuss your perspectives, your advice, and inciting change with all of us. I appreciate it. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you. Good to
Thank
meet you.
you.
all. Good to talk to you.
Bye-bye.